I'm very happy to be invited here, given the floor. My name is Durukan Dudu, as you just mentioned and presented myself. And I'm from Turkey. Though I and my team, we are working not only in Turkey, but in other countries as well. Now for a year in Sweden, for instance, and in some other abroad foreign countries. And I'm personally involved within the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization as an international consultant when it comes to work on countries like Uzbekistan and Afghanistan, and trying to come up with actually Kate what we are doing here in Turkey in those places in terms of especially grassland management. So what we do as Anatolian grasslands, as the name suggests, is very much focused on the grasslands, but it's not really about grasslands alone. What we do is called nowadays, now it became quite trendy, let's say, fortunately, is called regenerative agriculture. And the idea of regenerative agriculture, from a technical point of view, is to enable transition to agricultural practices, or as we call them, land management practices, because agriculture is, in the end of the day, is a land management methodology, right, to produce food and fiber. But to do that in a way that doesn't only sustain the ecosystems, but goes beyond that and regenerate them. So regenerative agriculture is about reversing climate change, stopping climate change, and adapting to climate change as well, not only to be not harmful to the nature and to the ecosystems, but to be actually regenerating them. So, and in this process, of course, there is a lot of very high potential of producing very high nutrition food. So it's also about human health and making people, enabling people to have access to nutritious food. But in the same time, it's to make all this process, the process of food, let's say, from the very first moment of, like, say, agriculture or all the land management practices to the end of the tunnel where we as human beings eat food, right? In the end of the day, this whole process to make it socially just and convivial, I would say. So I am not an agronomist, for instance. I had almost no experience or know-how on how to herd animals or how to manage land before I get into this 8 years ago. But the process is quite teachable, learnable, as we did within our team. And now we are training people all over Turkey, but as well as in other countries as well, in Europe and in Asia. But what I want to talk about really is, I can talk about regenerative agriculture, and especially the holistic management, the specific methodology that we are mostly, say, focusing on. But I would rather not do that, because there is really a lot of resources nowadays, even more about regenerative agriculture, holistic management, holistic plant grazing, on what it is technically and how it is done, like how can it be done. So I would rather focus on what all that means behind and beyond agriculture, because when we are talking about agriculture and climate change, ecology, because regenerative agriculture is that triangle of, like, ecology and climate change and agriculture, of course. But I would call that mostly a paradigm shift in the whole human history, in the all human existence. And the reason why I look at it that way is because the preset of assumptions and values and way of thinking and innovation that you have to come up, and especially our team has been so far so willing to come up, are so rich and so ground shaking, not only in agriculture and land management technicalities, but on how they organize, for instance, communities. What is a community? Like what can you gather around and like coordinate and enable people to act together as they have been doing since they are Homo sapiens, right? That's our thing. I mean, as Homo sapiens, our thing is to act together, is the ability to act together around not concrete only, but also ideal thinking. That's how we can tell ourselves to be I don't know, like Italian or French, like be around the national identity, for instance. The same way we can very much gather around a locality, for instance, or an idea, and really communicate and coordinate our acts in such a way that is super powerful. So our work so far, and there are so many examples of this in every day, in every step, has been very much concentrated and trusting on communities in that sense. And I would like to give you a few examples on what we did and how we have been able to do things that are considered impossible to do, just with that assumption, with that trust, with that reliance on building and allowing communities to merge. As I say, there are a lot of examples, but I know that our time is limited here, so I will just would like to focus on a few things. One of our recent, as you say, startups within Anatolian grasslands, autonomous startup, but we call it context-anchored startups or enterprises, because we have this Anatolian grasslands as the umbrella context, and all the startups that we have to fit in that context, but they are 100% autonomous in what they want to do. They just should not conflict with the general sets of ideas and values and strategies. So one of those enterprises is Safi Mera. Safi Mera in Turkish would stand for, or can be translated into English as, only grassland. Something like that, in a nice way, in a nice Turkish word. It's an non-existing word. It's just a word that came up. And the idea is that this is a brand. This is a brand that produce, process, and sell, very basically put, regenerative and grass-fed, only grass-fed, 100% grass-fed animal products to the consumers, right? So it's basically, you may think of like a butcher or a meat company, but of course it's not. We call it as Safi Mera food ecosystem, and it's just not fancy naming, but it's really what it is. And how we did it in the terms of this community building I believe is a powerful story, because in anywhere in the world, you shall not start a meat company if you don't have at least $1 million. That's it. Because you will have to invest a lot in the cold chain, with the trucks and the logistics, all the cold chain, cold refrigerator vehicles and everything. You have to have a facility to take that meat, to take those products and turn them into things that can be sold or sent over. And you have, of course, need to have communication person, salesperson. So it's a really big investment. So at least you're gonna have $1 million. And when we started, we had, well, a bit less than $1,000 to start with that initiative. So of course, like following the way of the old way of the current way of doing business in that sense will definitely not work, especially since it's the first regenerative and grass-fed food company in Turkey. So those words were not existing in the Turkish language before us. So it's really completely new and with no capital. So what we did was to involve community because people want to get together and people want to believe in the potential of doing things together. So what we did was basically, okay, we're gonna just do it as an ecosystem. So we cannot send your orders to all of you guys, all of you in the cities. So instead, what we're gonna do is that you're gonna organize yourselves in clusters, and you will have to like merge your orders together and appoint one of you to give that order to us, so that we will have not 100 points to deliver, but only 10 or 5, and then you will do the rest. And that was a crazy idea. How can you force or expect people to voluntarily like deal with all this, taking orders from each other, making payments to each other, and like getting the meat from each other and everything? But it worked. It worked perfectly, and it keeps working. Actually, it's getting even better now. It's getting bigger as an enterprise, and it's really getting into the point where people are able to, for instance, invest. People are able to invest at the moment, or pre-order with very high discounts and things like that, and give their ideas, say what they want to have as a product or what kind of food they want to have. So that's very interesting from a change making point of view, and mostly because we can talk about how beautiful it is, right? How beautiful that that having such a community, such a way of doing community work is beautiful. Yes, it is beautiful, and it is really something very, very nice and pretty, and feeling good about it. But it's also very actually rational, because when you think of it, any enterprise, any non-profit or profit enterprise, any company, any entity who is trying to make change has a lot of cost, a lot of barriers to make people convinced, right? To make people not complain about your service or your product. So you have to always give that effort to make people happy, because they are the client and you are a seller. And that's what you do. You have to sell it. So you have to make them happy. There's this saying, maybe in English as well, the client is always right. That's a saying in Turkish. The client, the customer is always right. So whatever he complains about is right. So you got to have this constant effort to try to make a change in a world where things are really not used to be your way. So you are trying to like stop that waterfall and like change its place with a small shovel only, without any resources. But when you do things this way, there is no seller, there is no client, there is no customer. It's just an ecosystem in which some people have mostly the role of eating. Some of them have mostly, not only, but mostly the role of, let's say, producing. Some of them have most of the role of coordinating. So it's that nobody tries and puts that effort, continuous effort, to convince each other, but it's just value-based, trust-based, and of course rationally, very nicely planned ecosystem where people get together to meet some demands in a nice structure where everybody knows what they have to do and what they should expect and what they would be responsible for, as well as, of course, they can always come up and say, hey, I want to do this as well. And it's always, of course, possible. I mean, we got a lot of, for instance, as we call them, prosumers or prosumer heads of prosumers, we call them. They come up and say, hey, I wanna start a new product with those meats, and I want to just take the responsibility for that and be the one producing those, let's say, dry meat or things like that. So there is really a lot to talk about the communities, but I believe we are, as humanity, very much undervaluing at the moment the potential, from a very rational point of view, the potential of robust, anti-fragile, skin in the game communities. There is a lot of potential there for enabling the change making not only to happen, but to replicate quickly and very powerfully. So my wish is really to be able to tell the stories and of course like replicate the idea and like tell all. That's the idea for us now in Sweden, for instance, really to demonstrate that if you got the community, if you got people with you in a nice structure, that's the important part, then you got actually the most valuable resource for you to keep trying your change making journey. So I guess my time is up with this, and I'm again thankful for giving me the floor.